Okay, so let's just jump straight into the questions. The first question is from Abhay Krishna. He says, I have heard that Gaudiya Vaishnavas can end up serving either solely in Krishna Lila, solely in Mahaprabhu's Lila, or shifting between both Lilas. My question is, how can it be possible that Gaudiyas could serve only in Krishna Lila when the only reason we have any connection to the intimate dealings of Radha and Krishna and how to access them is because of Mahaprabhu? And also the fact that at the very climax of the Rasa Lila, Mahaprabhu's descent is more or less created out of Krishna's realization that Radha is experiencing more bliss than him. So if he is at the very center of the window of the Gaudiya's transcendental reality, how can it be that some sadhakas could have an eternal service without him?
Well, I think that what Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said in this regard is a little bit different. And that is that some devotees have more attraction for Krishna Lila, some have more attraction for Gaur Lila, and some have equal attraction for both, which does away with your question, looking at it from that vantage point. That said, there are some Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and they're in an extreme minority. I only know of one lineage within the Advaita community, one of many, that promoted the idea that Gaur Lila is only manifest in this world, and as an outreach or as a means to bring people within to Krishna Lila, wherein, having attained, Gaur Lila has retired. As I say, that is not the mainstream of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and to support that, it's not mainstream. We have some poems, some stanzas, and so forth, meditations on the apricot Gaur Lila that have been penned by universally accepted saints like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We like to sing a Bengali edition of his Sanskrit description in 8 or 10 verses of Gaur's apricot Lila. The Bengali edition written, I believe, by one of his disciples. So that's an example of what I'm talking about as mainstream evidence for and support of an apricot Gaur Lila or a Nitya Gaur Lila, as you like. So yeah, your reasoning is good. I like that. That said, it may be possible that some devotees take Gaur Lila more in a way as a means to an end, then they are attracted to contemplating it as an end as well, right? It's more typical that in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the means and the ends are the same, but I think that one could probably make a case for looking at Gaur Lila as a means to enter Krishna Lila, and not being that attracted to Gaur Lila. It's hard to fathom, but I gotta say it's possible. And obviously, that one group that I mentioned must think of it along those lines. But let's say that's not your position philosophically, theologically, that there is an apricot Gaur Lila. It is hard to imagine someone wouldn't want to participate in it. Once one of my disciples asked that it seemed like Krishna Lila was more exciting than Gaur Lila. And I differed from that. Imagine if every time you chanted, everything that is said about the virtues and the possibilities that would result happened, etc. Every time you saw the deity, and so it would be quite an exciting life. So, but and just thinking out loud, maybe, possible that one looked at Gaur Lila to take the teachings, focusing on the Madhya Lila, where the teachings are found, as a means to enter Krishna Lila, which they are, and didn't cultivate at the point where one could an identity as a Brahmin boy in Gaur Lila, but only an identity in Krishna Lila, then it's possible that they could participate in the Krishna Lila and not in Gaur Lila. We say that Gaur Lila is inside of the lotus of Krishna Lila. So there are people on the outside, even of the Vraja Lila, let's say on metaphorically or poetically speaking, on the petals of the lotus that is Goloka, Vraj being in the very center. So in the outer petals, there's a possibility of participating in the Swakiya or married Leelas of Radha and Krishna rather than the Parakiya. So, and on a smaller scale, there are all kinds of windows or prakashas within the Leela that some are participating in and others are not participating in. So it's possible that one could participate in apricot Leela of Krishna, having gone there through the dispensation of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and only be attracted to that and not participate in the Gaur Lila. It's not that every night in the apricot Lila there's a Rasa Lila and Caitanya Mahaprabhu is emerging out of it or something like that. I think it is possible. I have met dance devotees, one who was more attracted, obviously, to Krishna. It was obvious to me to Krishna Lila, and then Gaur Lila, and I mentioned that to him, and he told me he had no imagination for that, for participating in Gaur Lila. That was Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj. So I was surprised. Now, I didn't press it further and ask further about it, but those are some of my thoughts on the subject. Thank you for a nice question.
Thank you very much. The next question is from, let's see, Krishnadas.
Dandavats. Good morning, Guru Maharaj.
Morning.
So my question is related to, I was recently listening to a talk that you gave maybe a couple months ago about the principle of accepting Krishna as one's maintainer, and how that relates as the main limb of Sharanagati, and how to practically apply that to one's life as a sadhaka. So I was kind of wondering if you could speak about atma-nivedanam and as a limb of Sharanagati, and how a sadhaka and would apply that principle practically and sustainably in one's life.
Yeah, it's rather subtle. I think atma-nivedanam means like self-resignation. Sometimes it's compared to conducting oneself in relation to Krishna like a domestic animal, who's like a cow in particular. You pull the cow on the rope this way, goes that. Of course, they don't always really cooperate, but they're supposed to. and in that way, I don't want to say dependent, because that speaks more to another anga. So as I say, there's really kind of quite a subtle differentiation, but self-resignation, I resign myself, something. I think it's always been difficult for me to talk about that atma-nivedanam as a separate practice, if you will. The example in the Bhagavatam about atma-nivedanam is Bali Maharaj, who was asked by Vamandev, Avatar, for 3 steps of land, and he gave 2 steps, and they took up the whole world. But it was basically nowhere left, and so he said, "Well, it looks like you're not good for your word, because you were going to give me 3 steps of land." I said, "Put it on my head, right?" So there's another example of atma-nivedanam. But I think that it's more of you have to look at it in a practical and sustainable way as a mental exercise, thinking oneself, along these lines. It's and it should be possible for either a monk, monastic, or a householder, conceptually, how it would play out, which is maybe also part of how you're asking, would be different in both instances. For a monk, it might be more apparent if he or she, monastic, was to be an example of that. Whereas for a householder, it might be played out in a way that wouldn't be as apparent. You can look at the life of Bhaktivinoda. There are many householders, of course, in Vaishnavism history, and Gaudiya Vaishnavism in particular. But Bhaktivinoda was prominent in the modern world, and he had like 12 children, I think, 12 or 14 children, it was certainly a Sharanagata in the full sense of the term, which would include atma-nivedanam. But in that instance, or in the instance of a household, it's more of an internal way of thinking about oneself that one cultivates, and then looks at the things that one has to do with regard to family life and so on and so forth, while doing them in a different way, if you will, than ordinary people do. That's why it would be more difficult to detect, if you will, whereas it's more apparent in the case of a monastic. But that's about all I think I can say about it. It's one of the 6 angas, and when it gets into Dhyana and Nivedam, they seem maybe a little repetitive, but there are subtle nuances, I guess, between those and aspects of humility or self-resignation that would appear to also be present in for example, the main anga of Sharanagati, which is to think of Krishna as my maintainer, right? So I would focus, that one maybe a little easier to understand, and then the others are aspects of it, something like that. Another way to think about it. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Where are you now?
I'm in Santa Cruz.
Okay. Looks like more like your old apartment in Fairfield, but no.
Oh.
Okay.
Much. I had a short follow-up. With these kind of questions of like the 6 angas of Saranagati and so on, like a lot of times I start thinking like it's kind of like this chicken or the egg question. Like, so we're supposed to kind of imitate the outer expressions of Saranagati to become more surrendered. It seems like what I mean with that is, so you act like a domestic animal, but actually you have all these desires and ambitions and stuff for yourself, but then you kind of like castrate yourself in some ways to behave like a domestic animal, but it's not coming from how you actually feel? Or is it that it's the other way around, that we have to somehow purify ourselves first and then we will want to surrender, that it's not like the kind of resignation that comes from wanting something else, but you just like surrender to think of something that you know is better? Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
Not exactly, but I mean, it's you can't say, okay, everyone should be a Sharanagata. Okay, today I'll be a Sharanagata. I mean, it's the outer expression of one's faith, which is something that's growing, and the depth of the faith, if you will, which is the animating principle in life, as we like to speak about it, as Krishna does in the Gita, is kind of central to the whole progression in bhakti. The deeper the faith is, well, there's going to be corresponding action, so, what can you say? It's an ongoing culture, and so, like I said, I don't entirely understand your question, but it's something that you sadhana bhakti, let's say up to the stage of ruchi, as I've explained it in my Shikshastra commentary. This is the culture of Sharanagati. So if you haven't attained ruchi, well, you haven't fully become a Sharanagata either.
Yeah. So I guess, sorry, did I cut you in?
Yeah. No, but
what
I think
I want to say is, then I guess my question is, like, how useful is it to act like a domestic animal if you don't feel like it in your heart? Like,
well,
you're basically imitating.
Yeah, it's not something to imitate. That I see. I guess I see what you're saying. Should I imitate this and then it will come, or should I know that it's there and cultivate my faith and it'll express itself, as time goes on, as the faith matures? I think the latter is more the case.
Nice, thank you. Okay, next question. Oops, where we are. Is from Krishna Sevaka Prabhu. He's not here today, but he sent me a question. He says, do you know if Krishna feels guilty or sorrow about creating the jivas whose desire for self-enjoyment brings about so much suffering for themselves? And secondly, sometimes it seems my desire to have a close relationship with Krishna is self-centered and will cause suffering until it is purified and turns completely into service and Krishna-centered. I want to know how to balance this.
Can you read that last part again?
Okay. So sometimes it seems that my desire to have a close relationship with Krishna is self-centered, and that desire will cause suffering until it is purified and turns completely into pure service and Krishna-centered. So he wants to know how to balance this.
Regarding the first part of your question, no, Krishna doesn't feel guilty. The statement is there in the sutras of Vyas. Lokavatu lila kaivalyam. The world manifests out of the bliss of Bhagwan, of Brahman. So the one becomes many. Of course, the many are always existing, but it means the manifestation of the world. So they're already there within him. They manifest outwardly, and then he contracts the world and brings the world back within. And they go into sushupti, or to deep sleep, only to come out again, and so forth. But I think a way to think about it that it's often talked about is that the jivas are within the depth of the being of the Paramatma. He manifests them outward that they might have a relationship with him. It just so happens that he's also the overseer of the Maya Shakti. So when they come out, they have to meet with Maya Shakti, and the influence of Maya Shakti is powerful. And as a result, the jivas identify with it, and so therefore they suffer. But he appears in different avatars. He manifests the Vedas and so forth. All these things to protect the jiva from suffering, to save the jiva from suffering. It's something like okay, should I feel guilty because I had a child? Because the child didn't take advantage of the teachings that I also gave the child and the help that I provided, and so forth. Should I, beat myself up for having a child? No. Gandhi had a statement that when he was told by the British that the Indians are not fit for independence. And then Gandhi replied, fit or unfit, we want independence. By your measure, standard measure, or maybe by some objective measure, perhaps maybe we're not fit. We still want independence, freedom. So, you can't ask Krishna to make a round square. Can you make a circular square? I mean, the question doesn't make any sense, right? So can you manifest jivas, which are units of will, in a sense, in such a way that they have no opportunity to do the wrong thing? That's like trying to make a square circle. If you're going to be a unit of will, which is so valuable, as we differentiate ourselves thereby from inanimate things, but you have no chance to choose the wrong thing, then you don't really have will. So no, he doesn't feel bad about that at all. And of course, you have to also appreciate the fact that these jivas are him. They're his own Shakti. So you could say, well, as much as the jivas are suffering, he's suffering. They're him. They're his Shakti. His suffering, in one sense, takes, because he's not subject to ignorance, which is the real cause of suffering. So there's a suffering on his part that takes the shape, if you will, of compassion. Paramatma is closer to the world, if you will, than Sri Krishna himself. And so sometimes it's said that out of compassion, the world is manifest. This is also the Caitanya-caritamrta is an example of that, makes that statement. So there's similarly it's said about Vaishnavas, paradukkha dukhi kripam buddhi, has no suffering for himself or herself, but suffers for the suffering of others upon seeing it, and at least, if not having experienced it oneself, and thereby having a great capacity to be empathetic, at least knowing the mechanics of it, how it works, and so forth, and as a result, expressing compassion. So if God doesn't feel guilty, but he feels compassionate. Now, the other part of your question, if I recall it correctly, I think that that wanting to have a personal relationship with Krishna and doing that such that it's not a self-centered exercise, the way that is done is you have to think about what Krishna likes. For example, in lila, what's pleasing to Krishna, what Krishna wants. Just like if you think about being a friend of Krishna, okay, then what is it that pleases him? Well, there's an aspect of him, which is his love for Radha. How could you ignore that? Now there are gopas that do. That's their bhav, ignore that. But from my vantage point, I'll be frank with you, how can I think of loving Krishna as a friend when there's an aspect of my friend that it's significant, that concerns his romantic life, and as a result, and results in him at times being in need of empathy a shoulder to cry on, and so forth. How could I be, do I want to be his friend and just herd cows and have fun? Because I like that. That sounds like a lot of fun. Or like, how does Krishna feel? How can I be his friend? What would, that's kind of an example of how to think about having a relationship with Krishna that's not self-centered. We may think, I like to do this, therefore I'd like to do that with Krishna. But what does Krishna want? Of course, he does want. There are different rasas, so it will apply differently in different cases. But this is the focus in Gaudiya Vaishnava. So we take romantic life, okay, Madhurya Rasa. What's the thinking in Gaudiya Vaishnavism about Madhurya Rasa? So if you learn that there's possibility of romantic relationship with Bhagavan, if you take it as something, more, or something that manifests practically out of the more basic and broad idea that this type of love, romantic life, is the most intense type of life. So let me do my sadhana in a most intense way, like a young girl falling in love for a young man, and allows nothing to get in the way. He's ready to break every rule for it. That's the broader idea, that this is just a sadhana. This is an example to help us understand the intensity with which, if I serve, I can come as close to the Godhead as possible. Now we take that to mean that it also plays out practically in a lila, right? And their leelas are described in different ways and with different details, different times, and so on and so forth. And that leela, or that manifestation of that idea, being a girl in a lila with God, aside from just being a model, to think about, well, that's described in poetry and so on and so forth. Now, what I like to say about that is that what's being described there is an attempt to talk about that, but what it is exceeds whatever anyone can say about it. Prabhupada was concerned that the lila wouldn't disappear as just a metaphor, right? And just serve as a metaphor. But there's a way to talk about it that is more than literal, rather than less than literal. Some take it as less than literal. I'm talking about it's more than literal. The literal explanations, it's more than that, and that can't be put into words, and you got to go there and experience it. But anyway, with regard to romantic life, then what is showcased in Gaudiya Vaishnavism? Having a romantic relationship with Krishna, what's showcased is the very idea that, well, I love Krishna romantically, and I enter into his romantic life, and I find out that he loves Radha. The dearly to Krishna is the Krishna controlled by Radha. And that no one romantically can please Krishna more than Radha. Therefore, if I want to serve him romantically, let me serve Radha. Assist Radha, because that's what his romantic life is about, ultimately, his affair with Radha. So I want to participate in his romantic life. Let me participate in it fully like this, by subjugating my kama, if you will, my amor for Krishna personally, which he's all attracted as a young man, young adolescent, right? Subjugate that to serve a dasya disposition, if you will, service to the one who he loves the most, and serve her, and help them to bring about the union. You see, this is them thinking about Madhurya Rasa not in a self-centered way, You follow? Just like I talked about the Narmasakas. It's in a self-centered way. I like the general idea, he's a friend. I like the general idea, but what is that? How does his life work? And then let me assist him in that, in that context. That's a little deep, but that's the answer to your question.
That was nice. Let's see. Okay, the next question is from Shraddha Devi from Canada. She says, Pranam Guru Maharaj, from our study group, we would like to confirm that Madhavendra Puri was a secret tree in Vrindavan in Krishna Lila. Being the tree fits in with the history that he did not want very much fame, which would interfere with his service. So that's the first question. She's got a short second question, but I can ask that once you've answered this one.
Well, it's mentioned in Gaura Dipika of Kavi Karnapur, which is a famous book wherein he makes a well-reasoned and spiritually sound conjecture as to who in Gaur Lila the devotees of who the devotees in Gaur Lila are in Krishna Lila, based on the reasoning, the spiritual reasoning that if Krishna himself is present in the form of Caitanya Mahaprabhu, well, his associates must be present, because you can't have Krishna without his associates. That's the Beta Bed, right? You can't have Yashoda Nandan without Yashoda. You can't have Radhanath without Radha. And their love, Radha's love, Yashoda's love, in this case, for example, Krishna corresponds with their love. So that's the one and different. There's a difference, but there's one. You can't have one without the other. So this is a very good spiritual reasoning on the part of the Gaudiyas, because many people in India say that their guru is Krishna, or this person is an avatar of Krishna, or Ram, or so on and so forth. But they don't stop to reason where are the other associates, and that they would be a necessity. This is a very deep understanding of Gaudiya Vaishnavism that it's hard to get around if you look into it. So Kavi Karnapur took up the task of identifying Caitanya Mahaprabhu's associates with associates of Krishna and Krishna Lila. And as I said, it's a spiritually sound and well-reasoned conjectures that he raises. That means that he looked in the scriptures. He's familiar with the bhavas of the different devotees of Braj. He's acquainted with and he interviewed apparently different sadhus of the time to get their perspective and opinions. Therefore, in some places he gives their different opinions. They're also reasonable, and so on and so forth. So I just want to put that in front of the answer to your question, emphasizing that there's some fluidity here and everything isn't like set in stone. And again, in the book itself, there are other conjectures, other opinions that he cites, other devotees that felt like this. Some say this, some say that. That could be this, could be. So it's a little bit like that. A century or so later, Vishwanath Chakravarti wrote a similar book, exact same idea. He follows Kavi Karnapur, I'd say about 90%, but 10% he has differences that he puts out there. So one of the famous examples in Kavi Karnapur's book is Ramananda Roy, and the fact that he cites 4 different opinions. Who is Ramananda Roy? Some say he's Arjun, the Narmasaka of Vrindavan. Some say he's Mahaprabhu says he's Pandava Arjuna. So some say he's a combination of the two, Pandava Arjuna and the Arjuna who's a Narmasaka. And then others say that he's Lalita, and others say that he is Arjuniya. So if you study carefully what he said there over a couple of verses, he emphasizes that, first of all, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said he's Pandava Arjuna, so we can't get around that, he says. Therefore, he can't be Lalita. So he actually is dismissing the idea that he's Lalita, although some say that in his text, Lalita Sakhi. What about those who put together the idea that he is a combination of Arjuna in the Vraja lila and Arjuna in the Hastinapur and Dwarka lila, Pandava Arjuna? Why are they doing that? Well, because they're faithful to the fact that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said he's Pandava Arjuna. But there's also things that come out of Ramananda Roy that weren't in Pandava Arjuna. After all, see how he answered Mahaprabhu's questions in their conversation. The conversation between Ramananda and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu takes all the way to Gopi Bhav and Madanakya Mahabhav and so forth. In the end, it was Ramananda Roy along with Swarup Damodar that were the closest associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, helping him to step into Gopi Bhav. How could Pandava Arjuna do that? He's not familiar with that. So they wanted to be faithful to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's opinion, but they had this also reason that, but we find things in Ramananda Roy in relation to Madhurya Rasa that's not there in Pandava Arjuna. So there's another Arjuna in Krishna Lila, in Vraj, who's a Narmasaka. So maybe let's make a conjecture. Ramananda Roy could be a combination of these two. Okay. The idea that he's Arjuniya, well, this is a statement about Pandava Arjuna. Pandava Arjuna asked Krishna in some Purana, well, what is this Gopi Bhav all about? And he said, well, he couldn't really talk about it. He said, go to Vrindavan, go and bathe in this lake over here, and then come back. So he went and bathed in the lake, and he came out the Gopi form. And he was named Arjuniya for a day, Gopi for a day, right? And then he came back to his original form, and he understood. So some say he's Arjuniya. Now, Karnapur kind of likes that idea. He's Pandava Arjuna and Arjuniya. But they're trying to do the same thing. He's trying to find where this Madhurya insight, romantic love insight in Pandava Arjuna can be found. So that's a way of reasoning about it spiritually. Of course, he was Gopi for a day. It doesn't mean there's an eternal Arjuniya who's a Gopi, something like that, but that's not the proper way to think about it. And anyway, so, this is an example of there's some flexibility there. Later, you find in Chaitanya-caritamrta about Ramananda Roy, when he's catering to Mahaprabhu with the Anti Lila, helping him step into Radha Bhav. Well, the author, Krishnadas Kaviraj, who's writing after Kavi Karnapur's book, reasons that Ramananda Roy served Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in a way similar to how Subal, who was the principal Narmasaka, served Krishna in his moments of separation from Radha. And Swarup Damodar, who was also there with Ramananda, served like Lalita. So he looks at Ramananda Roy more like a combination of Arjuna, Narmasaka, and Pandava Arjuna. So, there are different opinions. Now, sorry for the long preface, but you want to know about Madhavendra Puri. It's mentioned he's a Kalpa Vriksha tree. I would not take that in a literal sense. I would take it that he represents, like, in terms of the succession, because he's the guru of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that all your desires can be fulfilled, through him, such as the position of the Kalpavriksha. He's giving that. Now he's obviously deeply. It's also obvious, I should say, from Caitanya-caritamrta and other texts, but Caitanya-caritamrta in particular, that he's absorbed in Madhurya Rasa. There's a famous statement of his that he cited at the end of his life, very deep expression of Radha Dasyam. So it's hard for me to think of him as a tree. Now, that said, vines and trees are thought sometimes in Vrindavan to be in Madhurya Rasa. You see the tree wrapped by a vine, you see Madhurya Rasa, right? But in that instance, usually Krishna is the tree and the vine is Radha. And this is how Krishna is reminded, and Radha is reminded. They are reminded through the forest of one another. But I would look at that statement as a more kind of a broad statement that, he's given Mahaprabhu, and through Mahaprabhu we can, all desires can be fulfilled, the highest ideal. So I tend not to take it so literally that his swarup in the Nitya Lila is a tree. When we say that a tree is in Madhurya Rasa, or a hill is in, Sakya Rasa, or the cows are in Vatsalya Rasa, it's also clear from the Goswami's texts that these non-human examples of rasas don't experience the rasa to the fullest extent that those do in the human form in the lila. So there's some, shade of that, some semblance of that, something like that. And these tend to be features of the Dham. Extensions, let's say, of cows, extensions of Yasoda's Vatsalya Bhava, that go with Krishna into the forest when he leaves Vatsalya Bhava behind, to her great distress and concern, right? Nanda and her concern. They go with. Some semblance of Vatsalya Rasa goes with, rather than thinking, I'll become a cow, I'll become a tree, I'll become a stone in Vrindavan, And now Brahma prayed if he could just become a blade of grass in Vrindavan, he'd be doing good. That's a way of extolling the virtues of that place, because he said, I'll be trampled on by the heads of the devotees there. So the ideal of Gaudiya Vaishnava is to become in human-like form, to participate in the human-like lila of Krishna in one of these predominant sentiments that our material life is all about. It's about our kids, it's about our friends, it's about our lovers, and so on and so forth. Put Krishna in the center. So given that this is the ideal, it's hard to think of Madhavendra Puri as a tree rather than as a person, if you will, or in human-like form, to associate fully with the human-like form of Bhagwan there, rather than partially, as I'm explaining. And so, in that sense, well, then no particular gopi identity in the Lila has been assigned to him by anyone, but I wouldn't dismiss the idea that he is a gopi there based on that. Not expected. Maybe you weren't expecting that answer, but there it is.
Then she had another kind of question from the same study group. She asks, In chapter 5, verse 9 of the Madhya Lila, it speaks of a love quarrel or prema kalaha between Jagannath and Saksi-Gopala. Is there any more detail anywhere about this quarrel? Thank you.
No, I don't remember that quarrel between Jagannath and Saksi-Gopala. I'd have to look that up, to be honest with you. And I doubt there's any discussion anywhere else. Yeah, they're at a little bit of a distance from one another, so I have to look that up. But I don't know, other than what you find, just to refresh my own memory. But I won't be able to refer you to anywhere else. I certainly never saw that played out anywhere else. A disagreement between two deities, very interesting.
Guru Maharaj, one small thing. You said that Ramananda Roy was Lalit Sakhi, but wasn't it that he's Vishaka?
Well, what I'm saying to you is that he's not Lalita Sakhi. Some devotees, Prabhupada says, some devotees say he's Arjuniya and Arjun combined. Some say he's Lalita Sakhi. Some say he's Arjun and Arjuniya. He says, these three of these are right. And he implies there, because Mahaprabhu says he's Pandava Arjun. Whoever says he's Lalita is wrong. Okay, so he's now, well, as I said, there's some fluidity here. So when you go to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's book a century later, he says that Ramanand Roy is Arjuniya and Arjun, right? Okay, and Arjuniya is an expansion of Vishaka, therefore he's Vishaka. Now that seems to have been embraced by a number of devotees, and I think they really like the idea that Vishaka and Lalita, the two closest friends of Radha, were there in the end to help Mahaprabhu step into Radha Bhav, which he's trying to do and which they are so familiar with, right? So I think Bhaktivinoda liked that idea and thought of Ramananda Roy as a manifestation of Vishaka. But there's room for some differences on that in the realm of bhajan.
Nice. Okay, the next question is from Harijan.
Good morning, Guru Maharaj.
Morning.
I would like to ask, there is group of philosophers or atheistic maybe, and they say that ultimate reality is just some sum of all feelings or emotions, they call it qualia or something, and they cannot explain what's individual subject and individuality doing there, but they came to conclusion that there is some factor of time, and it's kind of hard to argue against it, and I don't know if even there is some sense to it, but because in Shastra it also says there's by time Krishna control the world. So could you explain how there is personality beyond time, if to elaborate a little bit?
Well, I'm not familiar with the philosophical perspective that you're describing. I'm more familiar with the idea that, which is the prominent philosophical idea, that qualia or qualitative experiences are an illusion. That's basically physicalism, naturalism, materialism, which is the predominant philosophical thought. And the reality is just physical stuff. The hard problem in philosophy is to explain how physical stuff can have qualia, qualitative experiences, feel good, experience red, blue, have the experience. That's what qualia is. Qualia is the experience. One of the a pretty strong argument against materialism or naturalism, which states that everything is physical, everything can be reduced to the physical, is the mind experiment of Mary's room. They took Mary, they put her in a room. She had no experience of red, the color red, but they acquainted her with all the physical properties of red. But when she stepped out of the room and experienced red for the first time, she knew red in a way that she'd never known it before, even though she knew all the physical properties of what we call the color red. So the argument is that, well, there's more to red, or the qualitative experience of a color, for example, or anything else, than just the physical properties of such. So this is an argument against physicalism. You may be familiar with the famous hard problem of consciousness that Chalmers came up with, which is, again, this, how to explain that non-experiential reality, physical stuff, can start to have experience or qualia. It just doesn't, you can't demonstrate that. You haven't been able to, it doesn't make sense. So we need to explain the experiential aspect of life as being non-physical. So, that's an argument. Now, I don't know what really, if you've represented an argument accurately, philosophically, I really don't understand at all what you were saying. Some philosophers accept qualia as being what? I don't know. Time. I don't really understand your question.
There's a statement that rasa vaisa, like everything is rasa basically, and they say like everything is like qualia. So it's kind of, we can compare them, those statements, but
you're saying that there are some modern philosophers that say everything is qualia.
Yeah, like everything is qualia.
Well, what do they mean by that? That everything is mind, for example? Everything is idealism. So yeah, idealism, you understand what idealism is, right? Idealism is that the world is thoughts, really. What we see physically is not what's really there, but it's how the thoughts of Bhagwan express themselves. And we only see part of it, the part that we need from an evolutionary point of view, they would say, to survive. We don't see the whole thing. Therefore, we're an illusion. So there's something to be said from that, for that. The argument against idealism has been for years, well, everything is not just your thoughts, but here we're saying everything is God's thoughts, including ourselves. No, these are thoughts of God. And so whether we experience them or think about them, it doesn't matter, they still exist. The physical world still exists as a way in which God's thoughts express themselves. So although things look physical and hard and so forth, that's only an appearance. So, in that worldview, everything is thought, and thought, emotion, feeling, for the most part, philosophers aren't distinguishing between thought and consciousness. We distinguish, we look at thought as a subtle form of matter out of which the gross matter comes, or the gross matter is thought expressing itself. But that thought, in a similar way that it generates gross matter, it is generated by consciousness proper. So anyway, if some philosophers are idealists in that sense, and they're saying that qualia is everything is qualitative experience. I guess they're idealists. I don't know what time has to do with it here. But if you want to send me, an article or the name of a philosopher that is promoting what you're talking about, I'll look into it and see if that idea has offers us some modern way of talking about our own perspective, which would be useful. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Anjali from Brighton.
Oh, okay.
Hare Krishna, Gauraj.
Can't hear you.
Oh, Anjali, go to below, there's English, and then click on the English and mute original audio.
Sorry, where would I see that, Ganesh Prabhu?
Do you see something at the bottom of your screen that says English? Little globe.
It might say interpretation too, I'm not sure.
EN, English. It's third from the right at the bottom. On the far bottom, it says leave in red. Left of that, it says.
I don't have it on mine.
Oh,
Right,
it might be different if she's on a.
I'm on a phone. So maybe that's why. Oh, hold on.
Muted.
Let's see.
Did you unmute yourself?
Interpretation. English.
Yeah. It's
Hello, Haribol? Hello, Haribol?
Well, it's good to see you. There you go.
Is that working? Hare Krishna?
No.
Okay. Great. Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Good to see you. And I had a question following Janmashtami this week. I was listening to Canto 10, the beginning chapters of Krishna's birth, and I was just wondering, so Kansa hears this prophetic voice when he's on his way to drop Devaki and Vasudeva, and I was just wondering who we should understand the source of that is. And in that time, was it that, these things would happen frequently for them to take weight of, voices that would come from and the messages that they would bring? Because obviously that triggers then the whole chain of events that follows.
An oracle, right? Something.
Yeah, I was just trying to make sense of where that, where we should understand that voice comes from, and because then Kansa ends up taking action based on that.
Right. Well, Krishna Lila, of course, involves the fountainhead of all divinity appearing in human-like form on earth, and all other features of divinity are within him and expressed to one extent or another within the Lila. Aside from the fact that he's the source of all avatars, devas, who are the consciousness, if you will, behind the macrocosm of wind, of light, air, and so on and so forth. These are all thought to be the daiva partial manifestations of the divinity who is the controller of everything. Sarva karna karanam. He's the cause of all causes. And so on a lesser, if you will, causal level, he's also operative as an Indra, partial. It's that position of an Indra, that position of a Brahma is a partial manifestation of himself, and some jiva may inhabit that post for some time, right? So this is just an example of Daiva. So from the celestial, Deva realm, it's obviously, you might wonder, well, where are the Devas now? And stuff, but where's Krishna now? So it's a special time when Krishna appears, when he who is entirely beyond time and space appears within time and space, for the express purpose of helping us get beyond that frame of reference, which we're limited by, which inhibits us from understanding him and thinking it to be a little fantastic or whatever. When he's present, then arguably, then other things that are out of the ordinary, divine oracles coming from the sky and so forth, are a greater possibility than in ordinary life in Kali Yuga, and it's not a special time for the avatars is of all, the source of all avatars is appearing and so forth. So there are wonderful things that happen around Krishna Lila that wouldn't happen ordinarily. So with regard to this oracle, like, the eighth son of Devaki will be the source of your death. So it's in this more subtle realms, like what we see, what we hear, what we taste and touch. This is just really like looking through a little tiny hole in the fence, the other side of what's actually out there. And we think it's the whole picture. It really is so far from the whole picture. And this is, to give an example of that, how limited our ability through sensual, mental, and intellectual power, how limited it is to understand the picture of the world, what's out there, right? Someone was telling me, maybe I was having a discussion with Gurnishta. Was it you, Gurnishta? We were talking about the fact that they don't even, in medical science, they don't even understand the digestive system. The gut of the humans. It's just like they have just a fraction of an understanding of how it works. We'll speak about how the brain, the most complicated part, works. But there's this way of talking about it that leads people to believe they figured it all out. They figured everything out except maybe just one little thing left to figure out. So that that's just an example of how complex, on the one hand, how limited on the other hand, our capacity is to understand existence with the faculties that we have of mind, intellect, and senses. And if you can really understand this point, it can be a very powerful impetus to apply oneself in the transrational practice of chanting, by which the idea is you can know something beyond what you could know with even intelligence, mind, and senses, and get another picture. You can't get the whole picture. There's no way by these limited faculties unto themselves. This is a very powerful point. And modern science, honest people in the field will, say things like what I cited about just the digestive system. Also in that regard, and this is part of the conversation I was having with Gurnishta, I'm reminded of, in modern science, I realize I'm speaking on a tangent, but I'll get back to it, directly answer your question. A lot of superstition has been retired. In medical science, for example, various shamans and whatnot had ideas about how to cure things that weren't working, and in modern science retired those superstitions and so forth. But unfortunately, what's happened in the modern world with faith in science, as it retires certain superstitions, also insights have been retired that were afforded those who are less in their head. Humans living less in their head, living less within reason, and knowing more, like animals have a way of knowing about nature at times that we can't pick up on with our reasoning. You can't be driving in a car from your travels on a vacation somewhere, and be blindfolded and realize now I'm getting close to home now. I can feel it. But a dog can. If you have a dog that lives in your home and you go on a trip hundreds of miles away, when you come back, as you start to approach the home, he can feel it. So that it's an example, right? Without reasoning, there's a way of knowing about the world. They can sense it, right? Whatever. May not be the best example, but it is an example. So humans, less relying on reason, knew about certain things, right? That have been lost by the exercise and emphasis of reason. Now that reason doesn't have a place, it can't take us a further distance. But if we get too intoxicated by reasoning power, then we can reason away the efficacy of reason itself. That's materialism. Reasons away the efficacy of reason, because there's no right, there's no wrong. There's just atoms or whatever physical forces. And if there's no right or wrong action, there's no right or wrong thought either. It doesn't weigh in on actual truth. It has no power to do that. So this is like the, excuse me for the term, it's just like intellectual masturbation that doesn't result in a child. It's useless. So anyway, there are celestials, there are subtle realms, there are ghosts, let's say, okay, and beings that see things from a different vantage point and can intervene on some level. But these are oracles then, and sometimes those oracles will manifest in certain expressions of nature, and those who are more attuned can read that and understand it. But a voice actually coming from the sky, well, that's pretty profound. But your question is who said that, right? So it's the celestials, if you will, participating from their vantage point in the extraordinary event of the Krishna avatar. The avatari appearing as the avatar. It's an extraordinary event. So all these possibilities of outside of the realm of our frame of mental, central, intellectual reference come into play when the fountainhead of all divinity is in the world. So there are oracles, demigods may appear and so forth, whereas they may not more readily. At times when he's not, but when he's present here, then they're going to be closer to here. So they are there to assist in some respects in Lila, just like Nard assisted in the Lila by telling Kamsa certain things that you would think he shouldn't tell him, but he's wanting to push the Lila along. So these devas, celestial beings, have some role in this way, and that's a prominent example of it. Which one or who, what his name is, who said that or hers, I can't tell you that, but that's the idea. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I think I was just slightly just questioning, why it was that Kansa would listen to that message and take weight of it, and I just wanted to understand, where it came from. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I guess he took. I think if you heard a voice coming out of the sky and other people heard it too, you would take it pretty seriously, right? Okay. So anyway, we ran out of time. Thank you for your question, and everybody else for their questions, and hope to be with you next week.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I have a few announcements today. First thing is, of course, Shyam Sundar is going to be giving his class next Thursday. It's going to be the 24 gurus, and the sun is going to be the guru of this week. And then some devotees apparently hadn't heard the announcement that Guru Maharaj made on this call, and I think he also posted it on the Sri Chaitanya Sangha Facebook group, and that is that we have a new website for all of his audio talks, 2,000 plus talks. And the Shabda Brahman site has been retired. It's no longer connected, and there's no talks there. It looks like it's still functioning, but it's not. And so swami.org is the new website, and there's a little thing at the bottom. You can sign up for a newsletter, and that's a new feature we're going to be kind of, releasing or putting out. And then the last thing is that Gaura just recently announced the Madhuban Winter Festival. It's going to be between the 18th of December and 18th of January. And Guru Maharaj is coming there for that month. So if you are interested, please contact Gaura and make arrangements to come celebrate the winter, I suppose. So just a lot of Harikatha and Kirtans and stuff like that. So that's all for this week, and I hope to see you all next week. I hope you have